The Wall Street Journal is reporting that Saudi Arabia is discussing with China the sale of oil in yuan and not the dollar. That's shocking and more important than many people probably realize. I'll get into what that means probably in another segment. So in the podcast version of this, you may have already heard this. But this segment is about Joe Biden deploying teenage TikTok stars to blame soaring gas prices and inflation on Russia as U.S.'s worst cost of living crisis in 40 years tanks president's ratings ahead of the midterms. The reason why I briefly mentioned the Saudi Arabia thing is the White House has dispatched social media influencers who have no idea what they're talking about to propagandize young people into their own destruction. And that's what they've been doing for some time. Under Donald Trump, things were generally improving for the United States. And I genuinely believe if Donald Trump was still president today, the war would not be happening in Ukraine. Gas prices would be down, unemployment would be down, and the U.S. would be growing and succeeding. And I wonder if, the reason the U.S. is being gutted and torn apart is that the powerful elites have already banked on China's growth and development and authoritarianism and have made those investments. Trump was investing in America. The elites are not. I don't know if Joe Biden cares more about future investments, but I do know that he flew his son on Air Force Two to China for private equity deals. So outside of all of that, it's hard to know exactly what's happening. But I can tell you what is contributing to the chaos and destruction that we see before us. And it is these vapid and ignorant social media influencers. Not all of them are vapid. I'm saying it's those that are willing to take on these roles of propagandizing for the White House without knowing what they're talking about and repeating government talking points that are helping contribute to the destruction of this country and everyone's suffering. It's fascinating. Joe Biden and Jen Psaki, the White House, they bring in these TikTok stars. Here's a good example. Ellie Zeiler with 10 million followers. She seems lovely. She seems like a nice person, but she clearly does not know anything about this. I don't blame her for wanting to talk to people about what she thinks is right. In fact, I absolutely respect that she was willing to have this conversation. I mean, it really is, it's kind of awesome. That somebody who's an influencer in culture and not politics is like, I think people need to know about something as important as, the war. I absolutely respect what Ellie is trying to do. The problem is Ellie is being exploited by the White House with false information and lies, which will only make the lives of young people worse. Ellie goes on to explain the reason that gas prices are so high. She says $7 down the street is because of, with the pandemic over, people are using more gas. That's a lie. I mean, it's not a lie on her part. She's being misinformed. The White House is lying about this. It is somewhat true. There's some somewhat true. It's always good when you lie to have a morsel of truth in there. She then goes on to say that the other issue is Vladimir Putin and the war in Ukraine. Russia is the third largest producer of oil. It's their number one export. And because of the war, nobody wants to trade with them. And that's causing prices to go up. That is a lie. While it is true that Russia is a large producer, one of the largest, and one of their principal exports is oil, energy, fossil fuels, it is not the principal driving factor in why gas is so expensive. One of the biggest reasons that gas is so expensive is Joe Biden has taken several actions throughout his first year or so as president to hinder oil production in the United States. Now, the pandemic is an issue. I talk a lot about gas prices, the complexity of what's driving the prices up. Speculative drive is one factor. And this is people buying up gas now because they're concerned supply will not meet demand. This causes an immediate cost crunch. That's one of the factors. Joe Biden shut down oil and gas leases over a lawsuit involving climate change disputes. That's another factor. Russia is a factor for sure. But what we're seeing here is once again the same playbook. Get young people who don't know enough about this to manipulate other young people into voting against their own interests. Let me show you an example. We have this story that goes back. This is October 17th, 2016. And I hope this video reaches those of you who use TikTok and are fans of Ellie Zeiler and other TikToker influencers, so I can help you understand how they're being manipulated. What the White House is doing is taking people you know and love, people who have a good heart, who are like, man, tell me what's happening so I can help the people who follow me, and then lying to them so that they can manipulate young people into gutting their own interests. I know, I don't keep repeating myself. Take a look at this story from October 17th, 2016. Controversy brews on YouTube over endorsement of Hillary Clinton. Some of the internet's most influential YouTubers are starting to endorse Hillary Clinton, a controversial move that has riled both peers and their followers. Casey Neistat, who has nearly 5.5 million subscribers and whose channel tends to feature videos about travel and adventure, started the recent wave of endorsements in a video where he sits down in front of his camera and says simply, "Hillary Clinton, I will be voting for Hillary Clinton." Instead of running on and off planes or jumping off cliffs, Neistat does nothing but sit in a darkened room and talk directly to the camera about how he usually doesn't bring politics into his channel, but this election is different. Take a look at this quote. Now, many of you who are using TikTok or are young or following Ellie, maybe you were only, this is 6 years ago. Maybe you were 12, 10, maybe you were 15, 16. Casey Neistat said, "I avoid talking politics on this channel, on this forum, because politics are divisive. There's always two sides, Republicans and Democrats. There's left and there's right. I can have my own opinion and there will always be an opposing one. That is the nature of a healthy democracy, but this is not that. This is about a megalomaniac who is driven by nothing but ego, a man who cares exactly zero about the people of this country, a person who brags about assaulting women and shames others for the way they look. I'm speaking up now because this election has very little to do with politics, policy, or legislation. This election has to do with morals and principles." Neistat lays out his argument. "I'm voting for Hillary Clinton because, make no mistake, there is one person who can defeat him, one person who can keep him away from power, and that is her. I'm not a huge fan of her stale politics. I'm entirely aware of all the criticism against her. I'm aware of all of her failures and shortcomings, but she's intelligent. She knows what she's doing. More importantly, she's mentally sound, she's responsible, and she's sane." Think about those quotes. Now apply them to Joe Biden. Joe Biden's stale politics are widely condemned and criticized by the left. When Hillary Clinton was provenly not the person who could have beaten Trump, and Trump ended up winning, you can see the problem with someone like Casey Neistat, who I know the guy. Good dude, once again. But there is an issue when people who don't know about this stuff are the advocates for it, or at least who don't have real arguments because they don't know enough of the advocates for it. He was wrong. If you don't like Donald Trump, you can look back now and say, Hillary Clinton was not the person to defeat Trump. They needed anyone else. In fact, Trump would have lost to anyone else, in my opinion. Hillary Clinton was so widely despised that Trump ended up winning. But I did not vote for Donald Trump in 2016, nor Hillary Clinton. And that I think maybe I'm a good example, or at least my story is an example of why many people, why Donald Trump won. I was absolutely unwilling to vote for Hillary Clinton. Donald Trump, I don't care about. For all his faults and all his problems, I'm like, I'm not going to vote for him. What do I care? Hillary Clinton, laughable. Warmonger, international elite who would sacrifice her own family for a buck. Never going to happen. Well, Casey Neistat came out, and when he made these points, he was wrong. It turns out, under Donald Trump, for all of his faults, of which there were many, gas prices reached serious lows. Now, to be fair, these lows were mostly during the pandemic when demand was very low because people weren't driving. And that plays a role. Oil producers were worried about the cost of oil going negative. They were actually paying people to take the oil from them. They slowed down production. That doesn't explain why gas hit $4 a gallon, though. What explains that is the U.S. had become close to being energy independent. I don't want to speak in absolutes. The U.S. was moderately energy independent. What I mean by that is, for the most part, we produced enough energy here at home to meet our needs. We actually began exporting oil. Imagine that. If right now we had maintained that level of production, which we didn't, and this also, it's not just Joe Biden, mind you, it is the oil companies that play a role in this. If we had maintained that, it wouldn't matter if Russia was an oil exporter. Who cares if we don't do deals with them? We are energy independent. Even Joe Biden has now called for this. But Joe Biden and the Democrats are very much opposed to fossil fuels, especially the Democratic Socialists, over climate change. I'm not here to argue for or against climate change or any of that. I'm simply going to tell you the fact. If you reduce production of fossil fuel energy, gas prices, energy prices, and everything else will go up. In fact, when it comes to wind energy, we have to use petro-based lubricants to make sure they can spin. So we still need petrochemicals and oil for all of these other technologies. I suppose we could use animal fats and plant oils and things like that and synthetics. Well, No, I shouldn't say synthetics are the petrochemicals, but we could use animal-based stuff. That would probably be much more expensive and involve harvesting a lot more animals' fats for machine work. But it's all possible. The simple fact is, whether you're concerned about climate change or not, whether you want green energy or not, is not the issue. I personally want more solar. I'm getting solar installed as we speak. I want more wind energy. I would love for us to reduce our dependency on fossil fuels for these reasons. The fact remains, if you reduce production for the reasons that Joe Biden is doing it, prices will go up, and they are. What we're seeing now is the White House lying and exploiting people, and it pisses me off. It's frustrating because, first, I am not the end-all be-all of knowledge, the arbiter of morality and truth. I don't know. I know a bit. I read a lot, and I can try and give you as close to a general understanding of some of these issues. Now, of course, if you go to the White House, they don't want to accept blame for their ideology. If you go out and tell people the reason gas prices are going up is partly due to the fact that climate change policy causes a strain on fossil fuel supply, driving prices up, that could hurt the agenda of those who want to build more electric cars and, wind power and renewables. Well, I don't want that to happen. I mean, I want more wind turbines. I want geothermal. I want tidal generators. You know what a tidal generator is? It's a big machine off the coast, and when the tide comes in, it spins a turbine, electric power. It's great. We can do tons of that stuff to capture energy and generate electricity. The problem is these politicians know that regular people will probably act for self-interest and say, I do want green energy, but my price of gas is too much. I'm struggling to live. How will I feed my kids? And people will choose to prioritize their families. So instead of telling you the truth, they tell you sweet lies. It's all Vladimir Putin's fault. So ultimately, what do I mean when I say against their own interests? Well, take a look at the cost of food. Meat and poultry, 13%, cereal, 7.5%, gasoline, 40%, 38 to be completely not to round up. I want to make sure I'm getting precise. Airfares, 13%, used cars, 41%. Fruit and vegetables, 7.6%. I think what's really happening, they don't want to tell you about, is that for the past decade, China and Russia have been preparing to get off the dollar. The Biden administration knows it. The Democrats know it. The neocons, neolibs, they know it. They need to enforce war to force these other countries to remain on using the dollar. They're not going to tell Ellie Zeiler or Marcus DePaula, TikTok influencers, to be honest. They're going to try and make sure young people are confused and blame Russia. Why? If NATO gets involved in Ukraine and stomps out Russia, the West can once again say, we are the empire. You will use US dollars or else. Now, part of me says, good. You know why? Because I like cheap stuff. I don't want to work 40 hours to buy, a couple loaves of bread and a couple gallons of milk. I don't want to work 40 hours to buy wood. No, we need cheap oil, cheap gasoline, so our excavators can dig holes and build foundations, so that we can construct new buildings and invent new things. Cheap oil helps us do that. How do we get cheap oil? Well, we control the creation of US dollars. And if anybody wants to buy oil, they got to buy dollars. Right now, Russia and China are threatening that. If we can stomp them out and point the guns of the U.S. back at all these other countries, maybe they'll get back in line and start buying our dollars again. Now, I can recognize cheap stuff is good, but principally, I'd prefer it if we just did the right thing and all worked a lot harder. I think hard times make strong men and women. And thus, many people in this country, the elites, the Bidens, their whole thing is let the world suffer if it saves me money. They knowingly accept slave labor products. And you know what the reality is? So do most Americans. Think about your t-shirts made in Indonesia. Think about your clothing made in Vietnam, your shoes, everything that's made in China because it's made for dirt. This is bad for us. We shouldn't have so much stuff, but we do because we exploit the petrodollar. That's what it's called. So what do you want? Do you want to be a good person? Do you want to be rich? Do you want to be an honest person who believes in the rights of others? Or do you want to be the noble who sits atop the throne of skulls? I think back to the, old legends or stories about medieval times or whatever, and the nobility. And I don't speak historically. I'm just speaking somewhat colloquially about these ideas, where the nobles lived in their castles and the peasants tilled the fields. That's still how things are, and maybe always will be. I don't know. The only difference now is you, as an American, you're a noble. You absolutely are. You don't have to work as hard as somebody in Mexico, even, our neighbor to the south. The average income yearly, I think in Mexico is what, like 8 to 10 grand? In Brazil, it's around the same thing. In the United States, it's 60,000. You are nobility. Now, we view our society based on, well, we view our society as our worlds for the most part. So, of course, as Americans, you might be a working class American making 60,000 a year, and you look up at these ultra rich people and you say they're the true nobles. And in this context, that's true. To the world, however, Americans are the nobility. We're the wealthy individuals gorging ourselves. Our homeless people are morbidly obese. We are the modern nobles. Do you want to live that way forever? Do you want to maintain that dream where you can sit back, get fat, gorge yourself, and work relatively little compared to everybody else? Then by all means, support Joe Biden and his war machine. Support his propagandistic efforts. Do you want to be honest and support yourself? Do you want to avoid exploitation? You need to get out of cities. You need to start taking care of animals. You need to start supporting yourself and producing your own food. You need to engage in fair trade. Of course, I'm not hitting every single possible point. I don't know everything about all of what's happening. The reality is, we are constantly being lied to. The reality is the White House is getting these young people as a new method of propaganda to manipulate, and these people are more than happy to do it. It's unfortunate. The path to hell is paved with good intentions. And so when you get someone like Ellie Zeiler, my only request to, say, Ellie or any of these other influencers, don't blindly repeat talking points from anyone, corporations, or governments. You know, I read ads, and sometimes I reject ads when I don't like what they want to claim. And I say, I won't do that. Sometimes there are some ads where they're like, we want you to tell people this is your favorite product. And I'll say, is it my favorite product? And they'll be like, well, I mean, just say it. And I'll be like, no, like I won't do it. If it is, you know, I have no problem saying it. You know, BioTrust, sponsor of our show, and legit, the stuff, the MCT stuff we get from them is my favorite. You mix in your coffee. I'm not doing a sponsor spot for them. I'm just pointing out. There's other MCT oils and stuff that I don't shout out. It's not, I don't care to. So of course, but there's a bunch of ads I reject. I won't say things that aren't true. If it comes to the White House telling me to say something, I'm going to be like, no. And that's why I don't typically fall for hoaxes the way most people do. I don't believe the Jussie Smollett thing. I don't believe the Covington thing. I don't believe a lot of the lies. But in that being said, there are some narratives that are called conspiracies that I also don't believe either. When the biolab story came out initially about Ukraine, that there were biolabs in the country, I said, I don't believe it. I don't care if you're the White House. I don't care if you're some dude on the internet. Show me the proof. And now we're learning there are a lot of biolabs in Ukraine, of course. I want to show you, give you some quick educational information. A nice shout out from the ever legendary George Orwell. One of the greatest quotes I've read, especially in a long time. George Orwell, and what he wrote is the Homage to Catalonia. He said, early in life, I noticed that no event is ever correctly reported in a newspaper. But in Spain, for the first time, I saw newspaper reports which did not bear any relation to the facts, not even the relationship which is implied in an ordinary lie. I saw great battles reported where there had been no fighting, and complete silence where hundreds of men had been killed. I saw troops who had fought bravely denounced as cowards and traitors, and others who had never seen a shot fired hailed as heroes of imaginary victories. And I saw newspapers in London retailing these lies and eager intellectuals building emotional superstructures over events that never happened. I saw, in fact, history being written not in terms of what happened, but of what ought to have happened according to various party lines. A brilliant quote. But it's not so much a brilliant quote as it is an observation. And that's what we're seeing right now with this propaganda. I'd like to show you another quote from George Orwell. He said, in As I Please, during the Spanish Civil War, I found myself feeling very strongly that a true history of this war never would or could be written. Accurate figures, objective accounts of what was happening simply did not exist. And if I felt that even in 1937, when the Spanish government was still in being, and the lies which the various Republican factions were telling about each other and about the enemy were relatively small ones, how does the case stand now? Even if Franco was overthrown, what kind of records will the future historian have to go upon? And if Franco or anyone at all resembling him remains in power, the history of the war will consist quite largely of, quote, facts, which millions of people now living know to be lies. It's fascinating, isn't it? We know the government lies to us. The government does not tell you the truth. The United States is not here to be honest with the American people. That's why they bring on TikTokers. This is why they bring on people who are not specialists in these areas. Now, let me just ask you, if you're a fan of these TikTokers, wouldn't it make more sense to invite journalists? Wouldn't it make more sense to ask journalists to sit down with the TikTokers? Why would the White House give talking points to TikTokers to just repeat without verifying or fact-checking? The fascinating thing here is they say they're trying to stop the spread of disinformation, but that's literally what they are doing. The U.S. is playing a game of information warfare. Their goal is to control what you think about these wars and these conflicts. Why is gas so expensive? It is complicated. It is true that Russia does play a role in this, but it's also true that under Donald Trump, gas did not spike this high. Donald Trump was clearing the way for more energy production in the United States. And even, look at Republicans. Drill, baby, drill. The famous quote, I think that was Sarah Palin. If you stop producing, gas prices will go up. Joe Biden is an advocate for suspension of oil and gas infrastructure and production. He's banned fracking on public lands. He suspended oil and gas leases, and he shut down Keystone XL. Those are going to immediately cause speculative drive where the prices will skyrocket because people are scared about the future. And then Joe Biden ended the sanctions on the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, which is a gas pipeline from Russia into Germany. Why would he do that? I don't know. By doing so, he cleared the way for Russia to continue. They were amassing troops on the border of Ukraine while he was doing this. I suppose the idea was a show of goodwill. Hey, we're going to give you this gas pipeline so you'll still be able to run your gas just over here instead. It was a mistake. We should have been preparing for potential conflict and making sure the United States was more resilient. In reality, you can either accept that these things are true or you can lie to yourself. Either way, you'll be worse off. Pretending that it's Vladimir Putin causing your problems will not change the fact that your problems exist. Denying the reality of ending fossil fuel production will not make your problems stop existing. So you can do this. Don't lie to yourself. If you have a problem with climate change, you can choose to accept that your gas prices will go up and life will be harder for you, but for your good cause. Or you can acknowledge maybe you don't really care about climate change and you'd rather just have cheap gas. I'm not saying you're a good or bad person. I'm saying just be honest with yourself. I am fully aware, the camera I am staring into, the computers I use before me, my cell phones, that these are made mostly by slave labor in foreign countries. It sucks. But I also recognize the power bestowed upon me and the abilities that I will have by using this technology to create videos like this. I'd prefer it if these goods just were more expensive. A lot of people wouldn't. I recognize that if I were to do away with the sweatshop labor in these foreign countries and actually gave people, fair trade for these goods and their labor, they would go up 3 or 4 times in terms of their cost. Personally, I'm okay with that. For the time being, it's not the system we have. I will be absolutely honest in acknowledging that over the past decade or so, we've had major stories about the Foxconn laboratories in Southeast Asia where people were trying to commit suicide en masse because the conditions were so awful. I won't lie to myself about it. I'll say, yep, it's happening. What do you do? Well, we talk about it. And I ask you all to be honest with yourselves. That's it. Seek the truth. The truth shall set you free. So, Zyler, 18, who's this guy? Khalil Green, Gen Z historian. I don't know exactly what his position is. I watched the video from Zyler, and it's clear that she was just given talking points and she doesn't know what this is. I don't blame her. She's being exploited and manipulated. She's being treated like a tool. She's being used. I think it's a bummer that you've got these energetic young people who are interested, who want the war to end, who want people's lives to be better, and the White House basically spits in their faces. I don't like Joe Biden. I also don't like Donald Trump for a lot of reasons. But there are some things I'm willing to give Joe Biden credit for. Absolutely. And Donald Trump, I think, deserves credit. I think if Donald Trump was president right now, your life would be a lot better. Period. For all of his faults. Just be honest with yourself. I'll leave it there. Even Trevor Noah said it. Crazy. Next segment's coming up at 4 p.m. over at youtube.com/Timcast. Thanks for hanging out, and I'll see you all then.